So in the spirit of what we were talking about watching the mind and noticing, starting to notice what's actually going on in here, being able to notice what's arising in the mind and watch it as opposed to being shaped by it. Right? Part of why we're always off balance mentally is because we are always being knocked over or pulled into or taken out of balance by conditions that are arising. And those conditions can be as simple as like the sound of the unpleasant sound of some kind of feedback, yeah? Or the unpleasant sound of somebody talking, where you don't like the sound. Okay? But a lot of the time what we're being knocked off balance by are things that are arising internally. And yet we just feel the effects of that, but we don't notice. We don't have a relationship actually to balance internally, mentally. We just know that feeling of feeling imbalanced. And imbalanced means not okay here and now, not at rest, not stable, not, well, in balance. Now, physical balance is, you could say it's more obvious, but actually people are so unaware of their own bodies that it's only obvious in a very gross level way. Like I've given that example before of like if you're leaning forward like this, it becomes uncomfortable. Because this is off balance. It's not a very kind of a restful posture. Whereas if you sit up like this, in contrast, there's some relief. It says, oh, there's a little more balance. Let's not say perfectly balanced. Say like a little more balance is palpably relief. Now, physically, we could take that even more subtle. So, if you watch a skilled athlete or a dancer, you notice that they are in balance even in very strange positions. And being in balance physically in a strange position or even in the air means you have optionality. When you're tipping forward, there's not much optionality. You can like put the brakes on, screaming, or you can keep falling forward. If there's some physical balance, you can change directions. This is like a principle that can be refined a lot of levels. Yeah? You can actually have imbalance in different joints, and that could be taken advantage of in various ways, or just cause issues over time, that kind of imbalance, physically. So I'm saying that because it's easier sometimes to notice. Yeah? Even though we're so unaware of our bodies usually that we're kind of not noticing that. But mental balance is not about, it's not primarily about balancing out the different kinds of inputs, although that can be helpful. But a lot of what mental balance is, it's about how am I in relationship to what is arising in the present, on more and more subtle levels. So how am I in relationship to what is arising in the present we usually think of as this situation is happening. How am I in relationship to it? And that's sort of like this big question, isn't it? Well, so-and-so's doing this, but I'm dependent on them for this reason, and I don't know if I should tell them this, and then how do I go? It's complicated, right? I'm doing this, but I don't want to, and I could have done it differently, but if I could have, maybe if I, it's big and complicated. we tend not to be aware in a moment-to-moment way of what we are in relationship to. So there is the big experience, but there's what in the present moment am I in relationship to? And maybe it's a feeling in your body. You think of a situation. This is building on what I was talking about last week. You think of a situation, and there's a feeling. Boom. How am I in relationship to this feeling? Am I desperately trying to make it go away? Am I letting this feeling fuel all kinds of other thinking? Yeah, say it's like a not good feeling, an unpleasant feeling. I think about it, unpleasant feeling. Am I letting it fuel a whole world of thinking? Taking me this way and that into this possible future, or this, we're trying to redo this past, or fill it in with a narrative about the present? Or am I in relationship to this feeling, tone, here and now, boom, and being present with it the way it is? Not pushing and pulling on it. This is important. I say this all the time, not pushing and pulling on what's happening. It is being with it in a balanced way, just like this. I'm not interfering with it, but also not taken over by it. Then, and you experience this in moments when you're with your breath like this, when you're not trying to make something more of it than it is right now, and you're not interpreting it whether it's good enough. You're just letting it breathe, and there's some balance with the breathing. Yeah? You're not trying. So in all of your social relationships, what makes it difficult? A lot of it is feeling tone that is present in your own body. How are you in relationship to that? Does it knock you over automatically? Does it take you out of balance? Yeah. Most people are not aware of this physical feeling tone. It's not, I mean, you call it physical or mental, but you feel it in the system. Most people are not even aware of that as a thing that's happening. It's just not registered. You cannot work with something that you're not aware is happening. Right? That's like I'm walking down the street and someone's pushing me over, but I don't know they're there. I'm just like, how come I keep falling? You ever had a friend? I had a friend like this when I was in junior high. I loved him, but he was, he'd be walking and he'd just like, there'd be a sign and he'd just like push you and you'd, hey, what are you doing to that sign? It's like slam into it. Was I the only one who had a friend like this? Hey, meet my friend, telephone pole. Anyway, my point is, if you don't know someone's doing that, you just keep, why do I keep bumping into telephone poles? Right? He was pretending he wasn't there, right? But, okay, bad metaphor. But you get the point. If you don't know what's happening, you can't find balance with it. Yeah, so you always think I gotta make this whole situation resolve before there's balance. And you know what that's called? That's called you're in trouble. You're in trouble because most of the time you don't have anywhere near enough control of the situation to resolve it right now. What can you work with? You can work with what's here right now. You can also take actions, but they are going to be primarily what's happening right now is this in here. So this feeling thing is a big deal, feeling tone. So a lot of balance is working with this feeling tone. You see something, there's a feeling tone. You hear something, there's a feeling tone. It's pleasant. Pleasant things can take you out of balance real fast. I want that. I need that. Any of you have that happen? Oh, and all of a sudden, balance is just totally gone. Why? Because you're, it's over. It's just out there. It's ahead. And a lot of people, you just watch people, they're living their life like that, just toppling forward. Yeah. Just physically, that is not balanced or restful. But psychologically, that is imbalance. It happens like that. But you don't notice. So I see something, it's pleasant or desirable, and then there's this getting pulled out of balance. You can be with something that's pleasant and feel it and enjoy the pleasantness of it without getting pulled out of balance. This isn't saying like, practice this, you will never feel anything pleasant again. You know, when pleasant things happen, you'll just be like, that was pleasant. You know, like that would be really not, that would be not good. That would be a bad outcome, right? You know, it's like all this meditation stuff, creating a bunch of very calm zombies. That's not what we're going for. It can be pleasant, but are you in relationship to pleasantness or to wanting? Right? We see so much consequence of people not being able to be present in balance with wanting. Is it okay to want things? I hope so. All these wonderful things to want. Even things that you could do or things you want to do. Ways you want to move or express yourself. But we don't know how to be in relationship to wanting without just getting totally taken over by it, which is like called losing balance. Yeah. Okay, so there's contact and feeling tone. Contact and feeling. I can't really repeat that enough. It's a good sequence to really get in you. Contact, sensation. Contact, feeling tone. Whenever you react to something, somebody pisses you off and you react, check the feeling tone. It was there, but you missed it. You didn't work with it. Whenever you get taken out of your game, whatever your game is, whether it's in some kind of performance or some kind of work situation, whenever you're taken out of your game, notice what took me out. And don't say, so-and-so. No, it is not so-and-so. What experience were you not able to be with some degree of balance? And that's the thing that you get to practice with. It's not like that's inherently some kind of kryptonite for you. No, that's what I didn't notice. That's what I didn't see. So we're finding balance or learning how to be in balance with unfolding experience, including sensations, feeling tone, pleasant and unpleasant, including emotions. And do any of you have emotions? Yeah. And do you know what? Well, do you think meditating will make you have fewer emotions? No. That would not be a good outcome. It's good to actually, sometimes I forget to say these very basic things. I forget because I'm so assume that that's obvious, but it's not obvious. You will not feel fewer emotions. You may feel even more. However, in fact, you probably will. I mean, I went through a phase when, and this for my, male conditioning, and let's put it this way, I noticed it. Right? I think because of the meditation, it didn't seem like a problem to me, but I went through a phase of crying a lot. And not because I was sad. I would just see something and it would just melt me. I just feel so much emotion. See a parent and a child and just feel all this feeling, or just see a person sit and feel so much, just see weird stuff, the street. The street. Oh. Why? I don't know. Or hear something meaningful, and or hear music, and right? So it's like you feel more. That's like all the feelings that I had conditioned myself out of feeling. Like, do we not have feeling? No, you just get conditioned out of like having access to that. It's very repressed or shut down. I remember when all that stuff started to open up. interestingly, because I think maybe because I was meditating a lot or whatever, I felt balance within it. Didn't feel like a problem. It was noticeable. Wow. Crying on retreat, just, and not even knowing why. A lot of times there wasn't even any content. It was just, maybe it was stored up, who knows? But the balance with it is the not fighting it and staying awake in it, aware, in grief, in sadness, in just feeling, in vulnerability, in excitement, in anger. I remember having a few situations where anger arose and feeling it way more than I'd ever felt it before. And thinking, whoa. Yeah. And yet, the mind could handle more energy. So these emotions are like energy. They're big and they can be powerful. And when there's some balance of mind, those emotions can be, and we learn how to be with them. That's the territory. So I'm telling you this so that you include this when you practice. So you don't just be like, all right, when I'm practicing is when I don't feel anything. Then I'm doing it right. When I feel things, then a lot of people think that. They think, oh, meditation is like neutral. I'm saying this so that you include it, so that you find balance within fear. Fear is a state. Every human being experiences it. It runs so much of our world and so much of your lives, fear as a state. And if you cannot find balance in fear, well, we see the consequences and you see the consequences. You don't have to be afraid of it. But how many of us practice being with it? Neither for or against it. Fear is fearing, pain is paining, anger is angering. So I want you to practice this way, and you will start to feel degrees of balance with more charge. This is like your increasing capacity to handle charge. Whether it's the charge of sensation that you normally react to by yelling or shutting down or running away. We want to increase your capacity to handle that charge of life so that you can be balanced while you're in the mix. Like I was just talking about how in the break, that's like we're going live. Where like you're in the ring. That's not the break. Yeah, we want you to be able to be present like this in the mix. That's important. You can watch this with any kind of performers, right? They can get taken out of what they're doing by a feeling and a thought. Often it's a thought. So we were just talking about sensations, talking about emotions. That can also take somebody out. You get a strong emotion, somebody pisses you off. That can take you out of a game. It can take you out of a very important moment in a human interaction, right? A moment that matters. You can be taken out by it. Why? Because you didn't see it arise and you weren't able to be present with it. And then thinking is just a huge one. So usually, for most people, the territory of their own mind, what's actually happening, it's just not part of what's on the screen. Like, sure, feeling tone's not on it, but thoughts are just like, forget about it. So when we practice this way, now thoughts are things. Thoughts are mental events that can be witnessed. Last week I was talking about the mind door, which is like the mind as a domain in which things arise and are experienced. You can make contact through seeing. So this is from Buddhist psychology. This is from actually Buddhist texts, early Buddhist texts. Make contact through seeing. Contact happens in the mind when you think something. It's like you're experiencing it, but just mentally. So look at the thoughts that take you out. The self-doubt. Just one self-doubt can take you out of so much. Why? Not because self-doubt is that powerful. It's because you don't know how to practice with it. You don't know how to be with it. It's like when a lot of things are like that when you start. It's just overwhelming because you don't know how to do anything in a new activity. And I remember that, early in doing, this is just an example from my life, but you can think of the examples from your life. Early in doing, jujitsu many, many years ago, it was just like, and I had wrestled before, so I thought I knew that kind of interaction. It's like people are doing things to me, I don't know what they're doing, I can't stop it. I can't stop it because I don't know what it is. So I can't interpret it or see it coming. It's like if somebody comes up to you and starts speaking a foreign language that you don't speak. It's like, I'm sure you're saying something very important, and I just don't know what it is because I don't speak that language. Right? It's not any fault of yours that you don't speak it. You just haven't learned it. And this is true with this inner territory. It's not your fault that you don't know this language. It's not your fault that you are not trained here. It's just that this is not common. But it's super important because you don't have to do jujitsu. You don't have to do, you don't have to paint or play music, but you have to live as a human, at least while you're here. Right? So this actually does matter a lot. So thoughts can be witnessed in awareness. You can hear them, right? And we practice, we train, we have enough balance so that we can know, doubt. Futuring, right? You can totally take yourself out of a present moment situation where you're totally competent and capable by getting ahead of yourself. Any of you done that in the past day? Yes, probably. Just getting ahead. And so do you have to stop that from happening? See, this is what a lot of people are working with and why so much personal work or inner work or mind training is so primitive. It's so primitive, it's like embarrassing. And it's sad. It's sad because people are working with their minds in ways that it doesn't work. It doesn't work in a robust way. So one way people work is they try to I'll just talk myself up so that I don't have any self-doubts. Yeah, that works really temporarily. Right? And it's not that that's bad, it's just it's incomplete. It's very incomplete. You have to learn how to work with, the thoughts that challenge you, the thoughts that scare you, the thoughts that take you out of your well-being, your sense of okayness, your confidence, your composure, your balance. What are those thoughts? You all have your own version of them, and they are so, if you're in my position where you hear what people's thoughts are, they're so boringly predictable, I'll tell you, you're in very good company. Right? It's because it's the human territory. It's not, and everybody's in their own little unique head. And so it feels so personal. And yet it's amazingly universal. That was one of the most illuminating things about starting to teach for me. It's like, oh my God, everybody's in their own experience. And people do not realize just how much commonality there is. They just don't know. I didn't know. So how to be present with these things without them taking you off balance? The mind, awareness can be with experience. You know that just from being with the breath. Awareness with breathing, awareness with a sensation. That starts to get very empowering. As you start to realize balance is not dependent on the content. Yeah? I'll say that again. Balance is not dependent on the content. Everybody's in the content game. I need more positive thoughts. I need fewer negative thoughts. I need more better feelings. I need less bad feelings. And then you're in the content game. And that is endless, and it is not a way to find balance. We find balance through liberating awareness, which is balance is not dependent on the content. The aspect of you that knows fear, and I mean knows it in the present, aware with fear, is not bound by fear or afraid. When you're witnessing thoughts, you're not just believing them and bound by them. Does this require practice? Yes, it does. Just like you can't read a manual on jiu-jitsu and go take on somebody who's been doing it for a long time. You can hear it. You're like, oh, that's a great idea. And then somebody says, okay, you know what it is, now go do it. So like, well, all right. It's like me reading or watching like a Steph Curry tutorial on how to shoot threes, being like, I got this. No, I don't got this. I need to practice this so that this gets in me in some way. I get the theory, that's good. And a lot of people in meditation stuff is like, you got the theory's simple. Now we have to practice at the moment of contact. We have to practice with what's actually affecting you. So much of that is right here. Okay? I'm not saying there aren't external situations that need to be attended to. I'm saying this is the piece you're missing. Okay? There may be other pieces, but this is a piece that we're missing. So, cultivating mindful awareness or stable wakefulness allows us the capacity to be aware before something happens. To see something coming, as I was talking about the other day. To feel a feeling arise. Okay. We're getting pissed. Or, okay, fear is happening. Or, okay, we're picturing tomorrow. Doesn't look good. Yeah, we're imagining. Oh, imagining my life. Not looking very good. Yeah. So I say, okay, now we're aware with this. Okay. So living in a way like this, we get used to living present. You're already present, but we're living in a way that's present. That makes us, in including this territory, it's not hypervigilance. This is actually important. Some people say, you telling me to be what's going to happen? Oh, a feeling. Oh no, No. Hypervigilance is a different vibe. Yeah? Let's call this, relaxed wakefulness or something. Or just chilled out awakeness. Resting wakefulness. That'd be a good one. We could call it resting wakefulness. It's like a resting state. And yet it's aware. So it's more likely to notice things happening in the present. Okay? This is different than hypervigilant. Because hypervigilance is like awareness without any stability, without any settledness. Yeah? When you're settled and present, you actually can be less hyper in your vigilance. You can be less because there's a confidence that grows in it. Yeah? And so much of the time, it's that, it's when we're caught up in our minds that we get, quote unquote, blindsided by things. And a lot of times people say when they get blindsided by something, I should have seen it. And why do they say that? Is because it's like you were focusing in some other place, or it was right here in front of you. Right? So it doesn't mean you'll catch everything. But I think this is an important point. We're cultivating, you don't have to go looking for content, but we're starting from here. Okay? So this is, in a way, this is basic mind training. There's very sophisticated mind training from meditative traditions. And then you watch the rest of society bungling around with it. And it's okay. That's how development happens. Right? But you don't need to bungle around. You can practice this right here and now. And so now let me shift to include some of the traditional Buddhist frameworks for a second, so you can see how those are located within this. A lot of the lists in the Buddhist texts are just categories of content. So I was talking about being in the content game. They're categories of content that you can be aware of, that awareness can be aware of. It can be aware of the 5 aggregates. It can be aware of form, of feeling, of perception. You ever had that happen where your perception is shaping things a certain way? You can notice it. The world got really scary all of a sudden. Then you can know it's perception partly. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just good to notice now everybody looks like a threat. Or, oh, now everything, all I'm seeing is what's desirable. Or now I'm seeing only what seems lacking or wrong or incomplete. You can notice perception change as a phenomena. So form, feeling, perception, mental formations, which is all the stuff I was talking about before, thoughts and mental constructs about who you are. You can notice that, yeah? And even sense consciousness itself, seeing, hearing, smelling. That's called the 5 aggregates affected by clinging in the Buddhist framework. That's all content that can be witnessed in the way I'm describing, with balanced awareness. Balanced awareness just means awareness that's not getting pulled around by experience. Okay? That's true with the 5 aggregates, true with the 6 senses and the 6 sense bases I was talking about. Contact through seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and contact in the mind. Okay, that's just a way of categorizing all of the experience that's happening for you. So if you're ever wondering what to practice with, that'd be a good list. Yeah? Same with the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of pleasant and unpleasant feeling tone, mindfulness of mind states, mindfulness of some of the other categories of experience, meditative experience. I don't know if that simplifies it for you, but I think that's a good way of framing some of those things. Okay, and so then there's the knowing of this content. And this knowing, this awareness with, it's not just a little bit of balance. This is kind of the gateway to aspects of what you are that are really beyond what we're used to. Yeah? And we're so content-based, and yet the domain of openness, of spaciousness, of spontaneity, of creativity, this lies in non-grasping at the content of experience and resting in vivid fullness, which is another way of saying awareness itself or wakefulness itself. So this has all kinds of practical aspects to it, which I was talking about before. And the basic training of being with your experience and not being taken over by it, increasing your capacity to be with all of this content in a way where you become much more skillful with it, much more balanced, and with much more capacity. That makes you more trustworthy. It makes you more competent in a variety of domains. It makes you more reliable. This is the same as trustworthy, right? Because you're not going to get pushed and pulled as much. Yeah? So the practical aspect, and then, this is not impractical, but this aspect of not being bound by the content of your own mind and body. That's hard to describe, but that's the best aspect. That's the most important part. That's the domain of really transcending this limited sense of self that most of us are living inside of. This sense of this incompleteness, this thing that needs to be finished or fulfilled, this thing that's not enough. These are the universals, the way we constellate our sense of what we are. Those feelings, that sense that it's this way, is because of being identified with the content. So the instructions are simple. And your nature is what it is. The nature of this experience is what it is. And I just encourage you to continue to practice. And that's why we meet in this way, to support you in this territory. Okay. So we can dialogue now about your topics, things that you're noticing in practice. I encourage you to listen to what other people say and to think about how that relates to your life. Because it's easy to be dismissive when you see superficial differences. But I think if you're listening in a certain way, you will find that in everything, anything anybody says, in everything, I don't know how to say that, but that you could find something relevant to you in almost everything that's said. Let's soften it a little. Okay? And it's because there's so much commonality in our experience. Does anybody have any thing you want to bring? Yeah, please.
Thank you for that talk of balance. It was really great. Thank you. My question is around regret.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in this area, balance is an interesting topic because you're sort of constructing your experiences and your content and looking backwards, but also looking forward. So can you just talk about how one approaches regret?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Regret happens, right? And that's a state that's not easy to be with, right? Because regret suggests that there's a whole bunch of conditions that you kind of wish had gone another way, or you wish you had gone another way. And who in this room can't relate to that, right? I mean, who in this world can't relate to that, who has any self-awareness? That's an important caveat. Yeah. And I think that's part of the kind of, I don't know, part of the vulnerability of our non-omniscience is that we can look back and say, oh, I could have done it this way, or I wish I had done this or that. And, you know, the instruction around regret is sort of the same, right? But it's good to say it, which is feel the feelings. Make room for the thoughts. You know, sometimes you think like, no, I have to move on. I shouldn't be living in the past. And sometimes even people use the meditation framework as a way to make that even stronger, that story. Like, no, be in the present, don't be in the past. But actually processing something that has happened can be very important. And part of processing it means when it arises in your experience, that you make room for it. You don't have to make room at every time of day. You know, if you're in the middle of something at work, you don't have to say, like, excuse me, I'm gonna be with my regret for a few moments, and I'll get back to you. You don't have to do that, but it's so important, right? So that those feelings have a place to arise and to be, just to exist. And that's true with so many things, with grief but regret is a big one, right? It's like, okay, and let the stories play, but the key is not to try to resolve it. You can't resolve the past. The past is done. Again, this is in the category of things that are important to say, even though we all know it. The past is done. And you're not perfectly omniscient, so you can't know everything in situations. You're doing the best you can, as that's always true, I guess. And so basically, yeah, be with the feelings, let the thoughts play and make room for them without pushing and pulling on them and without trying to just figure it out, especially if the situation's done. But even if it's not, let it move through you like that and see what happens. because that's the way we process things. That's accelerated processing. Sometimes talking about it is useful, but just let it. It's almost like sometimes these things we've gone through are still unexperienced, and the psyche knows it. It's like you haven't really experienced it, even though you were like nominally there. And sometimes when you're really busy or there's something very dynamic unfolding, it's understandable that you're not there in a way where you're feeling every feeling about it, because there just isn't time, or you have to perform in some way. So I think this is useful. There's a phase that a lot of people go through when they really do deep meditative practice, where all kinds of situations from the past start arising. Things that you regret or wish things. I remember things I didn't even remember before then. Just incompletenesses or people that you had harmed in some way, or just disregard. It's just little things sometimes, but you feel them in a big way. And it's actually an important phase of practice. It's a kind of purification, which means these situations have time to come up and be felt. A lot of times there are things like you're not going to go do anything about it because it's in the past. It's in the past. Sometimes you could make a correction or some kind of amends if it's appropriate. But a lot of times they're just like, okay, I said something to that person, or I didn't follow up on this thing. So I think that matters. So yeah, you want to let that process through and not think you have to resolve it or complete it. Any follow-up on that? Because that's sort of, I'm saying some general things, but.
Well, resolve is a really interesting word. Like, what does resolve, what does it mean to try to resolve something? You mean to solve it. There is no solving the past. So.
Yeah. That's a good, I'm going to repeat what you said. There's no solving the past. That's right, yeah. I mean, sometimes you can make amends, and you can make a corrective action. Learn from it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, great topic. Yeah.
So I'm not sure if this applies, but lately I've come to some situations where meditating, I'll find myself reliving some traumatic event or something, and I just try and surrender to it. And I'm not sure if that's the right word, but the surrender is more like just to be with it, just sit with it. Because part of me is my mind saying, don't go there, or hey, we could have done this, or just. So I try and surrender to be like helpless. Just experience this traumatic situations and just be with them. And hopefully there'll be some healing from that. Just kind of be with stuff like that.
So you're saying that you have these kind of memories of traumatic events arise while you're meditating, and you're trying to surrender to them, which is just kind of let them be and not, And qualitatively in your experience, how is that? Is that okay? Is that?
It's hard. Because I just realize now that part of me is just, that was fun. It didn't bother me. I'm all over that. But there's another part of me that's you're not.
Yeah.
Let's just sit here with this for a while.
This is, so you're saying there's a story that you carry, which is like, I'm done with that, I'm over it. But the actuality of what's arising is sort of like, you realize, no, I'm not done with that, there's more. In this territory, it's so important to listen to the quality of experience, because sometimes you could be sitting with some traumatic memory and surrendering to it being here, and it feels like I don't know it could be like, this feels hard and difficult, but there's some rightness in the surrender. So it's so important to listen to yourself in that. And sometimes there's surrender and it feels like, this feels like it's not right. I'm getting so overwhelmed by what's arising that I just feel like awareness can't even hang here, you know. And I think it's important to assess the difference for you, you know, and this is for all of you. So that if it is that other one where it feels like this is, sometimes the psyche just has a way of saying like, you know, not just unpleasant, but like too much, that you find some way to like balance things out, like put your attention in your toe, you know, or listen to sounds or open your eyes, you know, so some way of connecting with something that's not overwhelming, you know. So I like putting attention in like a toe or something that doesn't have a lot of feeling in it, but it's there, it's here, or like the feeling at the soles of my feet, right? And you can move back and forth between some neutral contact like that, or some sort of safer feeling place, and some overwhelming sensation. So that's just something you could play with, or others could play with. I think there's something very powerful about the kind of surrender you're describing. And it's important to trust the psyche's read on it in a way. I know that may sound very vague. Better to trust your own read than to not. Right? And you can play in that territory, you can experiment. Right? So, but I think from the way you're describing it, it sounds like there's something really healthy happening. That's the way it sounds, right? It's like, oh, there's just something's moving in you, and that can be very healing. So I think it's good. Yeah. Yeah, please.
I have a question about the nature of awareness.
You're not the only one.
Yeah, it's been confusing.
Uh-huh.
Last week you said that awareness is a function of the mind. Did I hear you correctly?
I don't know. Did I say that? Maybe. Now we have a recording, so we can like go back and.
So that sort of confused me.
Uh-huh. In what way? I don't know if I said that. It doesn't sound like me. But who knows? I could have. Is a function of the mind? Yeah, but tell me how it confused you, because.
Yeah, I think you were talking about 6 functions.
Oh, 6 senses. Yeah, and the 6th sense is the mind,
Right.
as like content.
No, it wasn't that.
No. Okay.
Anyway.
Yeah, but tell me. Yeah, but.
What was confusing me
Yeah.
is, if that was what you said, I was wondering, does that mean the mind connects with awareness? And that awareness is not created by the mind?
Oh, that awareness isn't created by the
Not
mind?
created by the mind. That-
Okay.
But I was trying to make sense of something that
Sure.
maybe you didn't say.
Well, no, I might have. Let me think of how to treat that. Okay, so the comment was that I had said something about the mind, and it sounded like it was something like that awareness was a function of mind,
Yeah.
or something. Yeah. That may or may not be true. You know, so it depends on what we mean by mind. So let's say brain. Is awareness a function of the brain? I don't know. That's not something that's experientially verifiable. So in things that are not experientially verifiable, I have to say I don't know. Yeah. So could be. You know, all these Buddhist teachings about the mind transcends the body, we could find out that's wrong. That all these experiences of that this is just mind generated and actually based in the brain. It's possible. So I'll just say that. I will say that when we talk about mind in meditative discourse, or you know, in the Buddha, and I shouldn't say the Buddhist, because there's so many different Buddhisms that treat these questions differently. You know, depending on which. But I'll say for our purposes and the way I am teaching, I'm talking about awareness as an aspect of being that mind appears as a function of. So it's kind of the opposite of what maybe I said last week. Do I contradict myself? Very well then, I contradict myself. I think Walt Whitman said that. So whenever you're caught in a contradiction, you quote some famous person. It's like a deflection. It's a high-class deflection. So I don't know if I said that, but I think that's important. It's actually, so I'm glad you were confused by it, because in a way, even the word mind is used differently. Sometimes mind is used with a kind of a big M, and sometimes it's not written, so you don't know what they're talking about. Mind as like nature of mind, which is not about mental content, which is usually what is called mind with a small m. So nature of mind transcends mind. It's not a function of that kind of mind, thinking, perception. It's not a function of content. Yeah. So I think experientially, I hope that clears it up, because that, I would say, no. You know, maybe a function of the brain, I don't know, but not a function of mind the way we talk about it, which is like content, perception. Yeah, it's more foundational than that. That's what you thought. Yeah, that's what I thought too. Yeah, experientially, that's and so this isn't as important as like it's not necessarily important to know what's like to prove which is correct, but they have different implications for experience, right? And so the reason that freedom is possible, the reason that you're not dependent on the content of mind is because of the nature of awareness. And that's why it matters. That's why what you're saying, your question you're raising really matters. That's why freedom is possible. Because if everything is just a function of content, then it's like, now I have the awareness content. Yeah, now I have the awareness thing present. And no, the awareness thing is present. It's like that's the most essential aspect of what you are. Everybody's forgotten about it, lost touch with it. You're distracted from it by all the content. But this is why liberation is possible. And this is why expansiveness and stillness and ease is possible, even in the midst of chaotic conditions. It's because of the nature of mind. Yeah. So great. I'm glad we talked about that. Yeah. And if I said the opposite last week, may we strike it from the record.
You alluded to the capital M, small m last week.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And the next paragraph.
Totally. Yeah, and I think I did say something last time about like big M and small m mind, which is just about as confusing as can be. So, yeah, but that's important. Yeah, those view questions. Let me just look at the time. Yeah, we should stop. Those view questions are important because they're implications for how practice unfolds. Yeah, and all of these things. It's helpful to have the view as something you've heard. But it's actually more important to experientially verify it for yourself. And that's the great thing about meditation. You can experientially verify any of these claims. That's why it's cool.